It's hot hatch time again, and there's so much to choose from right now that you might have forgotten that even Audi has a pocket rocket offering. Looking for a small car? Ford Cup for £6,000, Vauxhall Corsa the same, or new Polo for a little bit more? Well, quite a lot more really. Suppose for a moment you had £25,000 to spend on your next car. Jaguar S-Type? Nice big Mercedes? Well, medium anyway. Well-equipped 3 Series BMW? Let's look at it another way. Suppose you're determined to have the hottest hatch in town. In which case, Honda's smart new Civic Type R at £16,000 is probably a good bet and very hard to beat on any front, especially performance. And there isn't a hatch on the street that can match it for RPM. Alternatively, you might say to yourself, Mini Cooper S, £1,000 cheaper, and armed with a kind of millennium chic the Honda hasn't got, and nor has anyone else come to that. Plus it goes like you know what off you know where, thanks to a supercharged engine packed to the roof with torque, and it corners like, well, like a Mini ought to, really. Drawbacks? You must be kidding. Small boot perhaps, but who's measuring luggage space? But okay, if an extra suitcase or a bag of groceries does make the difference in your life, what about the 2-litre Alpha 147 with paddle shift gearbox? Very pretty, very fast and highly individual. Our car of the year last year still looks good on this list, especially at just over £16,000 with all the fun bits already bolted on. But there's plenty more out there for you to think about, like the often overlooked hot Seat Leon Cupra R for a very good value, £15,000, or the upcoming Focus RS. Or you might even feel like going top of the range and saying V6 Golf 4Motion at 220 horsepower and £20,000. Alternatively, you can spend an extra £5,000 on top of that and have this, the Audi S3. That's right, an extra £5,000 gets you an Audi S3 Quattro, which may seem like quite a large chunk of money for those pretty circles on the front of your car. After all, the A3 range is widely described as being an expensive Golf imitation, and some testers have suggested that the chassis isn't as sharp as it might be, not for the keen driver. But this is different, supposedly, because this is the S3. It has to be said that the chassis doesn't feel as firm and taut as you might expect and want. Compared to, say, the Civic R, the Audi feels a lot softer and looser, although the wheels hang onto the road just as well as the Honda. It all depends whether you want your hot hatch to feel like one, or to have a bit of big car kindness about the way it rides. And for 25 big ones, Audi obviously feel your bottom needs a bit more cosseting than it would get for 15. Which sort of begs the question, should they be building a hot hatch in the first place? And is this one anyway? Whatever, the softness, principally expressed in the way that the S3 deals with lumps and bumps in the vertical plane, and it's not difficult to get it to bottom out, certainly not as difficult as it should be, but that softness is only slightly evidenced by body movement and roll in the horizontal axis, and soon gives way to a much harder damping, the kind you expect. It only takes a little while to find out that the chassis is the equal of the four-wheel drive system, and then begin to rely on it as a package. And of course it's a very good one. Audi pioneered the road-going permanent four-wheel drive system under the Quattro badge 25 years ago. And refined as the mechanics have become, it's been much improved by the usual raft of electronic assistance. ABS is backed up by EBD, and the EDL traction control is complemented by the ESP stability program. So you can plunge on in the knowledge that after you've made a mess of things, the car will sort it out for you, and you should get by without a scratch on its admittedly pretty and stylish paintwork. And that, of course, is the other thing you get for the extra £5 grand. Whatever you say about that initial uncertainty in the chassis department, and it may just be that we don't like all that electronic gimmickry coming between us and the tarmac, whatever you think about that, you're still getting a car that looks expensively and immaculately Audi. And that's never so evident as when you climb inside and find yourself confronted by a dashboard that came straight from higher up the Audi range in design, style and quality. Good as the Golf may be inside, the Audi is nicer, and you will notice it, not least because the S3 gets £1,000 worth of leather seats included in its price. It also has electric everything you'd expect, though the fancy Bose hi-fi system in this car is a £500 option you may not feel like splashing out for. It might take your rear passengers' minds off their discomfort though, because there's officially not much room in the back. On the other hand, there's plenty going on up front, and here's another good reason for banging out the extra cash. Along with four-wheel drive, Audi also pioneered the use of turbochargers, and the experience is all here in an engine that you wouldn't know had a turbo unless you took the trouble to look under the bonnet. Unlike some turbos that read better than they live, the S3 numbers are there, but the experience is better than reading them. It goes well enough, and it stops well enough, and it handles well enough, but perhaps not well enough in any of those departments to justify that price tag. It's a good drive though, and one that will probably grow on you. But essentially this is a selfish car. You can have more performance for less, more fun for less, and more car for less. And the question is, why wouldn't you? So the general opinion then, good car, shame about the price. And if you have any doubt, then let's look at it alongside its on-the-road rivals. There are several competing for your cash, and when you line them up like this, it's interesting to see just how well BMW has priced its Cooper S, because it's far and away the star of this group. It's also the cheapest from them, apart from the Seat, which is very much the budget offering in terms of equipment and performance as well. Pick of the bunch on price then has to be the Cooper S, and we're glad we were right about that when we tested it on its own a few weeks ago. Ignore body style though and just look at price alone, and the Audi still doesn't look so clever, sitting at the top of a very prestigious list of expensive cars which you could have instead. A few more pennies indeed, and you could be driving an entry-level S-Type Jaguar. And for us, that puts the price of this undeniably well-engineered hot hatch into a perspective from which it can never emerge with credit. Let's be fair, what hatch, hot or otherwise, can go dollar for dollar against a 3 Series or a posh Jag and come out smelling of anything but a pricing blunder? Even ignoring price completely, we'd have to say that the Audi doesn't really come out on top of any objective evaluation. The Cooper S is once again the runaway winner of the Fun to Drive competition, and that helps it on its way to being best value, while the Seat narrowly escapes topping that list, but still comes out as a very practical car for less money than anything else here. So what are we left with? Audi's S3 is a fine car and an excellent hatch with something for everyone, except your bank manager. Even the interior isn't quite as nice as the Alfa, and although we know that's subjective, we still have to give the Italian its acclaim. So why have an Audi when you could save £5 grand and take the Golf? Only you can answer that, because apart from a few horsepower and that nice fat turbo torque curve, there's nothing in it. What it comes down to then is this: what's in a name? And if Audi is worth £5 to you, then go ahead. It may be worth it just to know you're in a minority. But do you really want to join a club for people who paid 20% more for their car than they actually needed to? And you can wipe the smile off your faces now, Golf owners. Even your car is bigger and heavier and more expensive than it needed to be. The new Polo is a good small car. Very good, in fact, but not very small as it happens. Larger than the original Golf, it's a big little car. Volkswagen unveiled the new Polo in Frankfurt last year, but this crucial new car, second only and only just to the upcoming Golf in terms of importance to VW, was shown to the media ahead of the show, and perhaps crucially, a week ahead of the Fiesta's official unveiling as well. Fiesta is bigger, especially inside, and Polo followed the same route, although it doesn't look it. What it does look is new. New car shapes are soft and round, and the subtle curves of the Polo prove the point. And it may also prove that Ford was right to make new edge into new blurred edge on the Fiesta. It definitely proves that the Polo was due for replacement, because the existing car looks a bit like Mark I Golf next to Mark III. So much of styles and tastes changed in the intervening years. But though looks and breeding count for a great deal in this style and cost-conscious segment of the market, they aren't everything. Fiesta is a driver's car that just got better. And while its largely female audience may not value that in the same way as male drivers, one thing is certain: they will be aware of it, they will notice it when they're sitting behind the wheel. Even though it's bigger than its predecessor, they're still calling it a Super Mini in the magazines and describing it as the best small car in the world. Car magazines have been packed with rave reviews all around for the new Polo, introduced for European sale earlier this year. Most testers have agreed that this is the defining car for the segment and will put competitors on the back foot for the next couple of seasons at least, giving the Peugeot 206 and the new Fiesta plenty to think about. Some have gone even further, suggesting that the Polo is so good, so fully rounded and well packaged, that it may even draw some sales away from the Golf itself. And before you smile, you might want to think again. The new Polo is bigger in every dimension than the original Golf when it was introduced in 1974 as a replacement for the 20 million selling Beetle. The changes aren't massive, and perhaps more revealing is that the current Golf is larger still, dramatically wider and quite a bit longer, without being a great deal heavier, and will probably grow again when we see its successor in the metal fairly soon. All this really proves is that over a period of 25 years, our perception of what constitutes a small car has changed noticeably, and there's no doubt that drivers familiar with the outgoing model will notice the benefit of the extra millimetres, all of which have been used for making the cabin bigger. So, new Polo brings a bit of extra metal and a bit of extra weight into the segment. And VW saw that as the right time to weight up the list price quite a bit. Although it is historically a car that holds its value well, this led many to see it as overpriced and say so quite loudly, sparking a sudden wave of upward mobility in the standard specification sheet, so that now your new Polo comes to you with a rather better kit list than before. And unless you go in at entry level, you'll find that the ABS and power steering is complemented by central locking, electric front windows and air conditioning, but not, strangely, by that most basic of family car necessities, a split folding rear seat. And despite its newfound millimetres, it's a 4-seater by any standard, though you'll be pleased to know that there is definitely enough room for 2 adults in the back, sitting behind 2 full-size adults. The 2 in front get the best treatment with height-adjust driver's seat and adjustable steering column fronting up a dashboard that's an improvement over previous Polo and a typically solid piece of German engineering, although not what you'd call inspiring, just unremarkably good. New engine choices are part of the New Deal, and the 1.9 diesels will probably be the most popular option, either in standard 64 horsepower form or the 100 horsepower turbo unit. The 1.4 petrols will be next in line, you would think, surprisingly smooth and powerful considering they're among the wave of 3-cylinder units which are becoming increasingly widespread in this segment. These are either 55 or 65 horsepower, but surprisingly the most potent 3-cylinder option happens to be the turbo diesel. Perhaps not surprisingly then, the top performers in the Polo underbonnet department are turbo diesels, though the bigger 100 horsepower 1.9 can be noisy, especially when you're asking a lot from it. And that may be a drawback when the petrol engines are quite the opposite, especially when you're driving at anything like cruising speed. In general, this means motorway work, and the smoothness of the engines plus the extra size makes New Polo a very acceptable means of getting about the place, with no need to be reticent about making long trips. And there's no need to worry so much about this sort of environment either. While the old Polo wasn't exactly famous for its B-road sharpness, the new one has been spoken to somewhat in the suspension department, and things are a great deal more acceptable here than they were. While Skoda dealers may happily boast that Fabia shares the Polo platform, you probably won't find that out firsthand round at your local Volkswagen garage, even if the Polo contrives to feel very different to its Eastern European stablemate. There's a little bit of wind noise noticeable at a steady motorway cruise, but it's far from intrusive and certainly won't be a bother around the lanes. What you may find annoying is that the suspension can be a bit noisy when it's working hard on less than perfect surfaces, though that doesn't affect the result, and as long as you're not planning to emulate Michael Schumacher or Colin McRae, you won't have much cause for complaint. And as we said right at the beginning, the other thing about New Polo is that it looks new. A mild makeover is all it's had, but with more than a touch of Lupo about its new round-eyed front end, it's a fresh-looking approach to a car that's already very popular with buyers in the Super Mini segment. Overall, it's difficult to find fault with it. A good, likeable car for what now looks like very sensible money, unless you just bought a Golf, that is. In which case, you're probably wondering what you've got for the extra cash you've been parted from. On the other hand, you might just have bought yourself a nice new Polo and then be finding out you could have bought a Fabia and saved even more. The drawback, of course, is that it's a Skoda, not a Volkswagen. But apart from that, you're looking at two cars which are essentially the same, and Fabia is a Polo by any other name. The range is smaller though, so Polo's entry-level 1.2 models are not matched in the Skoda lineup, and a close study of the different models makes the Skoda less attractive than at first sight. But you can model match among the 1.4 16 valves and come up with a reasonable bargain and find yourself a well-designed, well-engineered and well-made car for quite a bit less than its VW badged equivalent. Not as much as 10% less, but a good bit less. Or you could just forget budgets and have fun. There are several sport versions of the Polo, and at the top of the range, when you spend almost double the price of the cheapest Polo in town, you're competing on price with the least expensive of the grown-up hot hatches, the Seat Leon Cupra R, and only looking slightly upwards at the Civic Type R. Still, the Golf GTI started this particular ball rolling, so who knows?